Starting off this week's episode of Fire Force with arguably the best moment of last week's episode of Fire Force, knowing that Juggernaut probably wouldn't make it out of it alive, and if he did, he would be gravely injured, and seemingly he's lost his hand. I mean, there's technology in this world, so you might be able to argue maybe he'll be able to get it back, but still, damage was dealt to our boy. And to start the episode off with Tamaki honestly in a pretty bad situation, all things considered. A sister who hasn't had as much combat experience as a majority of the people in this mission, who is now tasked with the objective. Does she run for her own life, which she easily could get away with her kind of like Neko fire abilities, or does she stay and fight and die to protect the one who fought and died to save her? Granted, he wasn't dead yet, and granted he isn't dead by the looks of it at the end of the episode, but all things considered, with no help in sight, it looked like he was going to die, but she was determined to fight and save his life. And honestly, the direction they took Tamaki and her not being able to one-shot KO everyone, I did definitely enjoy, and her kind of having her last stand was a breath of fresh air for a character who has just been here to be fondled up until this point. It's nice that they actually used her abilities to a pretty decent degree, even though it wasn't the craziest stuff. It was nice to see her, because honestly, Tamaki's fire abilities I think are some of the most untapped potential the show has had. So it's nice that she was able to fight off some Infernos, but once you introduce two white-clad members, there's no way she should have realistically been able to deal with it. So it's nice that the captain and of course Ironhead comes in and just seal the deal here, because it makes sense to have her be able to get this emotional growth to really make her feel like she has no worth because she feels like she's always being saved, which isn't technically wrong. But it's nice that she did decide to stand up for someone who risked his life to save her the same way that she was just doing in this episode. They definitely used Tamaki in the best we've seen up until probably ever. This seems like probably the best we've seen of her, and hopefully it's a good sign going forward because there's a lot of potential for this character, so hopefully this is a good sign of what's to come. But the thing that honestly caught me off guard the most was Dr. Giovanni. This dude came back like no other. This dude is outerworldly, he's now an insect, he is creepy beyond repair. And you started off this witch plague doctor, creepy as can be. Now he's full insect and is like climbing on the ceiling, using pincers to go up people's skull. It is horrifyingly disgusting, disturbing, and honestly, Arthur didn't pop up. I don't know how Shinra would have dealt with this. They clearly need teamwork to take out Dr. Giovanni, and honestly, that's probably my most anticipated thing next week. Even though the episode ends with probably one of the insanest cliffhangers we've seen, the whole idea of sinking the city, and now that the Fire Force have been lured in, this necromancer has enough bodies to power her vision. There's a lot of insanity with that ending, but honestly, the teamwork between Arthur and Shinra is something we don't see a whole lot of, but whenever we do see it, it's hilarious, it's action-packed, and generally is pretty adrenaline-rushing. I was really curious what they're going to do with Giovanni's body, because they did a really great foreshadowing in the episode where his body was kind of like mutating and splitting apart, but you weren't totally sure what was happening, so when the leg reveal comes, this is disgusting, and the fact that we're in the nether where it's so dim and you don't have a lot of light, and when you do get a good look of what you're seeing, you wish you'd never seen it before. They did such a great job at really putting Shinra in a pretty bad situation, and the fact that he can use like his insect and just kind of like predict what Shinra is thinking or feeling, it feels very, very bad. So to have the delirious and delusional knight pop up, it's probably the best thing you could hope for, though it was kind of frighteningly hilarious that I'll take the rear and protect you when he left the boys to just fend for themselves, and luckily it was only one Inferno, but that could have been very, very bad, all things considered. And even speaking of Arthur, I thought it was like hilarious enough to have one character that was as delusional as Arthur, then you introduce someone who has one of the funniest designs I've ever seen, who hardens his body like you're basically forging a sword. Clearly, I think most people probably assumed what his weakness was, because if you're moving around but your heart is steel, clearly your joints are probably not protected in the same way. But just seeing the absurdity as you're having this big brother just argue for his little sister's safety, which is the most ridiculous concept ever. To have, like, you're in a life or death situation and you're trying to, like, bitch at the person who brought your sister aboard, because look at this monstrosity, this is stranger danger, how could you dare put my girl in this situation, she would have been as beefy as this is not what a lady is, and it's like, dude, you gotta fight for your life here. And it was a hilariously action-packed, ridiculous situation. And I like how when characters are stupid in this show, like announcing your name or announcing your abilities, other characters will call you out for being a dumbass. And I love our boy being like, he's just like Arthur, he's just a stupid. And I'm like, thank you. This is what I love about Fire Force when you get those kind of like comedic relief moments. It just always knocks your socks off, in my honest opinion. Giovanni's stuff was easily my favorite moment because I think it was the most horrifying, and Nether is all about the frightening. But the cliffhanger was definitely a very close second. I think there's a lot of potential with this plan, and thinking about how Season 1 ended and now how Season 2 is clearly ending, there's a lot of, like, comparisons and parallels, but also it feels like the stakes are even higher than before, and if they get Shinra, it's game over. Like, once they secure Shinra, this plan is clearly going to be executed, and honestly, if they take too long, they might just execute it before then. And that's why I really hope we do get that third season, because the cast of characters have become so engaging, and looking at what Fire Force has become, sure they have the escalation in opponents and the more, like, this person has more powerful fire attacks, or the character's build's a lot bigger. At the end of the day, it still feels like everything is just improving time and time again. I mean, take Tamaki as an example. It's night and day what we saw in the previous season, and even earlier in Season 2. There's so much potential to wrap up this story in such a great way. And hopefully, we won't see it next year, guaranteed, with probably the next JoJo part probably coming out next year. Data Production probably has other things in the pipeline, but I could see a 2022 release, in all honesty. I feel like there is potential to get a full adaptation here, and I'm really hoping they'll do so. And if not, maybe we'll just get a one-core Fire Force next year or something, like near Christmas or something. I don't know. There's just a lot of potential, and if it ends just with Season 2, it's still going to be a satisfying ride in a certain sense. But I think most of us watching, if we do get an incomplete adaptation, will be checking out that manga sooner rather than later. This episode, it just felt like so much happened. Honestly, when I was watching this, it kind of felt like I was watching a double-length episode. Not because the pacing felt stretched, but just there was so many things happening. The Tamaki stuff, the Shinra stuff, and then you have the whole brother dilemma. It just felt like so many things were happening, and then you end it with one of the most brutal cliffhangers and horrifyingly realistic consequences of going into the Nether, and it's hard to say where they want to go after this episode. Logically, you want to say there's no way the city is going to crumble and burn, but at the same time, based on what Fire Force has shown us with its brutality, that's a very likely possibility. Imagine if episode next week or the week after ends with the city crumbling. What is the cliffhanger going to look like for Season 2? Even if it's a brutal cliffhanger and we have to wait a while for Season 3, that's going to keep the hype and the interest in Fire Force alive and well better than if it was a pretty decent stopping point and the production committee and Data Production were like, the manga's now over, there's no use doing a Season 3. I think the way they're setting up Season 2 with how big and epic and how much is left to tell, it feels to me like most likely they're really going to commit to a Season 3. I know that's just like optimism on my part, but just seeing like where the story is, even if they have a decent stopping point with the Nether this season, there's still so much left to tell, and you can tell we're in the endgame or getting closer to the endgame, and that's really exciting. Great episode, action-packed, emotionally driven. I mean, I hope Juggernaut pulls through, but I mean, goddamn, it looks like he's pretty wounded, all things considered, and there's some great emotional development for a lot of characters across the board, and who knows where it's going to go from here. Of course, as always, let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. What did you think, and what was your personal favorite moment? And honestly, do you think these characters are going to get out of this alive? If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like to show your support and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.